I want to welcome you to the third APDR virtual roundtable. The moderators today are myself and Petra Lewis. Next slide, please. So our goals for today are, we're going to be discussing a few topics, and we want each to exchange ideas, listen to each other, and come up with solutions to these new problems that we're facing because of the virtual format. Our topics for today are how can the program best assess the candidate, and also how can the applicant learn about your program. Our panelists today are Harp Betty, who's the Vice Chair of Education at Boston University School of Medicine, and Petra Lewis, who's the Vice Chair of Education at Dartmouth. So, yeah, Petra will be sharing with us how we're going to be working today.
So I know many of you have been with us before, so you've probably got this, but just to run over it, you all come in muted because there's a bunch of attendees, so to keep things from being too chaotic. You can, if you want to speak, then if you hover down on the bottom bar, there's a little button that says raise your hand. And raise your hand. I'm going to be monitoring it the whole time, and I'm going to, it just comes up on my list. First person who raises their hand comes to the top, and I'll say, so-and-so, you know, say it was Amanda Easton here. Amanda Easton, you have something to say, you can now speak. You may have to unmute yourself, so just keep an eye on your unmute button if we don't hear you. If you don't want to speak, then the other option is to put something into the Q&A. The Q&A is just moderated by me, and I can either just send the comments straight through to the rest of the group, so you might want to just see what other people are saying, or if that's something that seems to need to be answered live, I'm going to mark it and we'll hold it, and we'll try and get through as many of those as we go along as we can. So.
Okay, so just a few rule sets when we speak. Please, we'd appreciate if you're going to, if Petra calls on you, that you state your name and the institution where you're from. We're trying to keep our answers succinct so we can give as many people an opportunity to participate. And if you need clarification, so you ask your question, people answer it, but you still need clarification, you can also use the Q&A button for that as well. All right, and there may be an opportunity in which we want to poll the people that are here. And so if we say, we'd like to poll the audience for your feelings, we'd ask you to push the raise the hand button, and then we'll count how many hands are raised, and that will give us an idea of how many agree with the statement that we've proposed. Okay, so we're gonna start. I've asked Harp Betty to start us off on how the program can accurately assess the candidate. He is one of the authors of an article that will be coming out soon that a group of educators got together and answered these questions to help program directors around the country on how to deal with this new virtual format. So Harp, why don't you share with us what you learned when you were researching for that article?
Yeah, thank you, Angelisa. Thanks, Petra, and thanks to all of you for joining today. I know this is a new era, and the virtual interview season is bringing probably some angst to everybody in the space of assessing candidates. So some of the research that I did for the paper we are writing was, even though this is a relatively foreign ground for us in radiology, a lot of other subspecialties have been doing some version of virtual assessment and interviewing for some time. Family practice, orthopedics, there's been a lot of feedback from a lot of other specialties on how much the candidates enjoyed it, how much money they saved, how much more flexibility they had. And the programs clearly saved some on their budgets as well. So this is not something new for other subspecialties in medicine, and it's certainly not something new for other fields outside of medicine. In the business world, this is a very common place to interview remotely, have some degree of assessment remotely. So that's the first thing, is that this model has been going on for a little bit. The second thing is, when we talk about assessment of candidates, we usually have the objective criteria which is all the parameters from the ERAS applications that we were used to looking at, and the subjective criteria. And a lot of that subjectivity comes in with the feel we get for the candidate when the candidate is with us at our institutions and interacting with us in the residence and that type of thing. And though, you know, that's not completely reproducible, I would say that there are ways to still, and we've been dealing with this through the COVID era, even in our own professions and our own lives, to have some semblance of connectivity and a subjective assessment of candidates. So that's the second thing I'll mention. And really the last thing I'll mention is something we were talking about a little bit earlier is, you know, there are two ways we can go about doing this virtual assessment of candidates and virtual interviewing of candidates. And the first way is clearly completely trying to replicate what we normally do in person. And we can say, okay, well, we have these events that we hold, and we're going to simply try to copy and paste those in a virtual setting. That's the first way you can, and certainly a fine way to go. The other thing I am more an advocate for is to leverage the strengths of the platform, the virtual platform, to even have a more unique experience in the interview process and the assessment process than you would have been able to give in person. So just a quick example of that would be, you could recruit faculty that are either retired or even other parts of the country to be part of your interview day, because they would normally not be able to be present on that day. So there are going to be people, either former residents or faculty or wherever, that have a vested interest in your department, and you could make them part of the either social event or make them part of the interview day. Some of them may be even more seasoned interviewers than many of the people that are currently in the faculty. So you can leverage people outside of the four walls to have either, you know, more assessment or deeper assessment of your candidate. So I think in that point, I would say try to use the strengths of the platform to make something you probably would not have been able to do in the in-person setting. So all ways to use that as an assessment tool.
That's great. So why don't we open it up? So Harp has shared with us a way of thinking about the virtual day and how to assess in a different way using a Zoom or virtual platform. And the idea today is to help each other with interesting ideas on how to run that day. Would anybody like to raise their hand or write in the Q&A box other ideas that they have had or heard of that they think would be helpful from the group? And Petra, you'll let me know.
Yeah, I will do. Everyone's being a little shy at the moment.
All right. As people start to be less shy, Harp, what else? What other? That was your first way of using. So using different people that may have graduated or prior faculty. I've also heard, we recently had our program director did an outstanding job with graduation, and she had chat rooms that were really fun. Has anybody thought of using chat rooms in a way that would make it interesting?
So we've also thought about this a lot. And one thing is, you know, we have found that the pre-interview dinners have been, you know, a really effective way of trying to evaluate the candidates, at least informally. And, you know, how do you replicate that virtually? So I think what you don't want to do, you can't replicate the dinner. You don't want to put, you know, 12 residents and 20 students into some room, because that's not going to be effective. So we thought that we would use breakout rooms by having small groups of students and residents. So maybe, you know, 2 or 3 residents with 2 or 3 students in particular rooms, and then maybe they could swap between them. Maybe they stay there the whole time, but I think maybe kind of trading them from room to room would be good. And really making that a sort of informal networking. Here's your chance to answer questions. I think there are things, if you do that, you have to reassure the students that's not being recorded. I think that's important, because I think it would be a very stressful situation if they felt that they might be recorded.
That's an outstanding point. I hadn't even thought, I think I was just think I hadn't even thought of that, Petra, but I think that you're right. That's a really good point.
Yeah,
Because they don't want that to be reviewed if they're asking these honest questions.
Yeah, and also, letting them know that this is their opportunity to mingle with some of the residents and ask casual questions and reassure them that there's no faculty kind of like trolling in the background. They can believe you or not, but you can try and reassure them. So that's come up. Somebody's got a comment here. Depending on how many folks we have for interviews, fellowship will probably have interview breaks, swaps to meet. Interview breaks, swap to meet with our trainees. So it sounds like a similar thing. We will indicate that we'll not record. So I think he's saying the same thing.
Yeah.
I think other things is, I think it's from, I'm a student mentor, for us training, or at least giving our students access to know what's appropriate and inappropriate to do in this situation, giving them helps. I mean, some of them it's a more casual generation than us. I mean, Angelisa, say your comments about bias by clothing earlier.
Yeah, so I was speaking to Harp and Petra before you all joined, and what I find interesting about this new medium of interviewing people is, will our biases be different because of a different platform? And to give you a silly example, but it's actually true, is we had a interviewer that was in tune to the interviewee's socks. And if the socks were a little crazy, that actually meant something to that interviewer. So we're no longer going to be able to see the socks, but will somebody, like here I am, so you can see me, using their hands and just, what will be the biases that we then may inadvertently downgrade or upgrade a candidate based on this platform? And I think that that's something that we should all be aware of and be speaking honestly about. Is there mannerisms, like if someone stutter, like will it be more apparent if someone has a mannerism that's accentuated that is annoying?
Well, Angelisa, even let's take it a couple steps further here. And so, for example, anybody in this COVID era who knows, who has small children and have been homeschooling, let's take this for example.
Oh, yes.
We have exposed even backgrounds. Children are using virtual backgrounds during Zoom calls because they're embarrassed of showing their classmates the inside of their homes.
Yes.
Because they live in certain homes, right? Versus the other people in their classes. So there are certain things that, and this is where I think the discussion of bias is extremely important, because it just goes beyond mannerisms and these types of things. It's the things that candidates may not have control over that we may unfairly have a bias towards. And so I just want to bring a few examples up that we all need to be very careful about. For example, if certain candidates have better lighting or equipment to conduct Zoom interviews than other candidates, we can't hold that against them. There may be medical schools who are providing venues for their students to hold calls when other applicants have to do it in their homes. Many won't even have the control over interruptions or distractions because of their family situations. We can't judge the fact that the internet access may not be as strong because they live in parts of the country that doesn't have strong internet access. So all of these biases we must be very, very careful of. This goes beyond the way they dress and the way their mannerisms are and that type of thing, but there are inherent tools that certain candidates will be better off with than other candidates that we must be very careful about and sensitive to.
I have an observation. Angelisa, you're facing a window, right?
Yes.
So I can't see your eyes. I can't see your eyes because the light is reflecting off your glasses.
Yeah.
And I think that you have to be aware of stuff like that so that you don't let it unconsciously give you a negative impression of somebody. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
So
But I think that if someone, I'll be honest, I'm kind of particular. If a dog walked across, like, I'd be thinking, why are they not organized? Or, you know, I just think that we should be consciously aware of that these are new. I hadn't even thought of a child, but that's true. I could easily see a child coming into play.
I think we also need to look at this in two sides. We need to look at educating the candidates. So, you know, I think I and my colleagues have a responsibility, and I just did a Absolute Steel webinar that we had 170 students come into, which is up on YouTube if anyone wants to send it to their medical students. Just type Absolute Steel and it comes up.
Not abs of steel, but apps. APDS.
APDS. So, you know, we have a responsibility.
Steel is another video.
Yeah. Yeah, but probably more helpful, at least somebody my age. You know, we have a responsibility to teach these students some of this basic stuff because it's obvious to us, but it's not necessarily obvious to them because they're used to a more casual kind of, you know, interface on you know, webinars and Zoom and stuff, where it's funny if somebody walks behind you. It doesn't matter, you know, it's like, you know, my FaceTimes with my daughter, she's always walking around with her iPhone giving me motion sickness, and it doesn't even occur to her that that's seriously irritating. So I think we need to educate them, and then from what Harp said, we need to educate our faculty to you know, realize that the students who didn't get the memo or couldn't, you know, get themselves in a really good place, or, you know, the dog's barked or whatever, to not be biased by that and just, you know, put it aside. And, you know, a student who's sitting there and interviewing with you and suddenly, you know, their kids run past or their dog barks, and they're going to be embarrassed and it's going to make them uncomfortable. And then you know, you kind of have to account for that. We got a couple of good comments
Good.
in the Q&A. I don't know if you want to address those.
Yeah, so Reva Aguilar says the camera angle is very important to give a good impression. I think that's what we were saying a little bit earlier. Let's see. I assure them that I'm in the background during interviews purely for technical purposes as a moderator to ensure that the call is going well. We may recommend that they would appear as they would for an in-person interview. So again, so those are some interesting things. On your web page, will you ask them to dress a certain, I don't know, would you, Petra or Harp and Vicky, you all are med student advice, you know, you help with the med students. Would you require that everybody use a background that is?
I wouldn't require it. I might suggest it. I would suggest it to them because it makes it even and standard. I mean, so standardized. Suggesting a institution's accepted logo as an interview, you know, makes good sense. I mean, you could send them that logo. I mean, they all know how to put that into a virtual.
That's what Desiree Morgan just put. You can send a background photo, maybe of your school or a program that is standard to reduce anxiety of background.
Yeah, I mean, I said in this Absolute Steel that, you know, you can see here I'm kind of on my porch, but I normally do it in the kitchen until somebody said, Petra, how come you've got 2 cocktail shakers and like 26 wine glasses in your bar behind me? Which, you know, hello. You know, so I realized that was an inappropriate background. Bill Freeberg has a good idea here. Should we provide a FAQ for candidates on how to interview via video platform? So
that's what I was getting at. I think that's what I'm saying is, since this is new and all schools do not provide the same type of education, would it be helpful to have that on your website to reduce the anxiety? So Bill, I think that's great.
You know, we're sort of sitting with the panel of the specialists of cognitive overload, right? So what we really want to coach your interviewees or your applicants is, don't do anything that's clearly within your control, because we just talked about how many things are out of their control. That's going to distract the interviewer from you. You are the focus of this. So having distracting backgrounds, it's like having distracting slides during your talk. It's the similar idea, is keep things simple behind you so the focus is on you and not oh, I wonder what kind of books he has in that bookshelf. Then you're reading the book titles, or
Right.
or this, that, you know, it's keep it simple and keep it clean. So the focus is on the interview.
So the
Yep.
AAMC has written a really nice guide
That's right.
for students for doing virtual interviews, and I think it's excellent. And I think, you know, we should send it out to all of our students who are applying to radiology at our institutions, because it, you know, I mean, we can certainly replicate that, and I think it's not a bad idea, and we could, you know, crib off it for the APDR and send it out. But I think they pretty much cover everything.
So Karen Johnson has a good point that I want to bring up, because I hadn't even thought of this, because I have read that businesses require applicants to have their camera turned on during a virtual interview, which seems reasonable to me. But would that impart an unfair bias against students who may not have a camera? Or can we assume that in this day of mobile phones, everyone has access to a camera? So again, this might go to Bill Friedberg's FAQ. I do not think personally it is unreasonable to require a camera, but I am very open to other people's thoughts.
Well, I think they're all going to have more savvy about this than we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and clearly, I mean, they've been being educated in their medical schools remotely at this point. So
Right.
everybody has had to have had access to some type of, I mean, if they're taking any classes at this point, they've had to have access to a camera.
I guess
But
the only one that maybe, the IMGs, could they maybe not?
I don't know. That's why I'm saying maybe this FAQ is really important, and we have requirements.
Which also brings to another bias of, like, how are you going to handle time zones in the interview?
Oh, I identified that and sent it to you.
I think Vicky, I think you're on.
I just muted her.
Okay.
How are you going to handle the time zone issue for out of the country or, you know, international applicants?
Good point.
That's a good point. I think, I mean, I would say you need to have not just morning interviews, you need to have afternoon interviews and schedule people appropriately, right? I mean, you need to be cognizant. Even the people in, you know, California, if you're just scheduling them, you know, blind to time zones and you schedule them for an 8 o'clock interview, it's kind of unfair.
It's unfair
right?
to have them get up at 5, right?
Yeah.
Like, but the problem is if you're holding an interview day and you're timing people based on breakout sessions, that type of thing, and you have a lot of people that are vested into certain time slots, or other time zones are going to have to, you know, commit to those time slots potentially, unless you're going to be strategic about certain time slots at certain days or certain, you know, time zones on certain days. There's going to have to be some, you know, some leeway there.
I think you've got to have, I think this is part of what you said, Harp, about we need to not just try and replicate the old interview day. We need to, you know, leverage the platform. And part of that's going to be, you know, maybe our, you know, like our old system, we interviewed all in the morning and then, but maybe that's not going to work. Maybe we need to interview in the afternoon, or some in the morning and some in the afternoon. We've got to be very cognizant of where people are coming from. It's going to make it more complex. And we're also, to my mind, when we schedule these things,
We're going to talk about that next time, the nuts and bolts.
Oh, okay. I'll forget
So
about that.
yeah. So I would like to kind of get us back on track as to how we're going to assess. So we've talked about internal biases, and I'm hoping that that gives programs a checklist to say, okay, I need to speak to my group, my interviewers, about things that can happen that you should be aware of. The other idea was of chat rooms. That I'm just recalling what the ideas that have come up, and thinking of clever ways on how to use chat rooms to assess the candidate. Hart gave us the idea of having other people besides our typical interviewers assess. I'm hoping that other people have thought of other things. Anybody else have ideas? I see right now the AMC, you're sharing that. Anybody else have any great ideas of how to replicate the evening dinner? Or the other thing, if you think about the interview, how are you going to like show your department? Will it be a video, that kind of thing? All right.
People put your hands up if you want. There is a interesting question here.
Yeah, from Payam.
Yeah.
Should we have a standard approach to people who are local, or try to visit programs to say that we as PDs have decided we will not allow anything in person to avoid the possible advantage to the people with means to travel or other biases? So our GME has already stated that we cannot treat local or non-local people differently. So we will have no live interviews.
This might be a good place to poll. What do you think? See if anybody is planning to do live interviews of local candidates. So if you are currently realizing it's only June, planning to interview local candidates or some live interviews, if people say that they can travel, are you going to be doing that? Put your hand up if you are going to be doing that. So the hand upping button is down the bottom. If you hover over the bottom, it should come up with the little hand thing. Nobody so far.
Well, that just, I think that I assume people are trying to figure out, but maybe not.
Neil says maybe.
Okay, yeah, some people are writing in. Our JMA has forbidden it. Ours has too. I think that would be unfair. Our school said absolutely not. So I do think it would be I think that personally it would be very unfair.
I think so too.
It is so awesome that my system just crashed when we were talking about this.
Yeah.
The irony of that was awesome. Please don't judge me. What just happened?
No judgment, Hart.
Wow.
Yeah, we're trying to bias you. There's a whole bunch of people who are writing here saying GME has said no to in-person, and we are not doing any in-person interviews at our institution. All
right.
I think that's important. And, looking at harps crashing, that just shows that you have to leave,
Right.
a little buffer time in terms of.
That's right. I'll have to talk about that on nuts and bolts. I agree, because I think that will come up. Like, what do you do?
And so I'll tell you what I just did. I mean, I don't know what happened to the Wi-Fi, but I immediately went on the hotspot of my phone, like just to get back on as fast as possible rather than.
That's a good FAQ too. If this happens to you, do this for the interviewer.
Yeah,
right.
If your Wi-Fi fails, just get on the hotspot of the phone immediately, and have that ready to go.
So I think we should put together a little FAQ. We can take the AAMC and we can always make it more a little specific to radiology.
Yeah.
Send that out to APDR members. And then I would suggest that when students accept interviews, that you send them that out. Give them a little guidance, a little gentle guidance to help you through your virtual interview day sort of thing.
Right. Don't chew gum, don't eat during the interview. I've been on Zoom calls with people eating. I think I might have myself done it.
No, that's a great idea. And we've got a little time.
Yeah. So something that is kind of, it's aligned. I don't think we touched on it in the other, I can't remember if we touched on it in the other calls or not, and it's a different topic, it's a different but related topic, is if we end up getting a ton of applications this year, which is certainly possible.
Yes.
Are any of the programs considering asking for subsidiary information to sort of try and weed out the people who are really interested in your program? And we were thinking of saying, if somebody's applying, immediately they get a thing that says, thank you for applying to Dartmouth Hitchcock. Could you please send us one paragraph saying why you're particularly interested in our program? And that we would consider that they were more serious contenders, because we're a little worried. We already have over, 100 times as many applicants as we do slots.
Mm-hmm.
But is anyone else thinking of doing something like that?
I hadn't thought of it, but I think it's a good idea. I mean, we get a huge amount of applications just because of where we are in, Southern California. And I worry about the concept that not that we get more applications, but that we put our first round of interview invitations, and the top tier candidates get every interview in the country, and then a bunch of people don't match and a bunch of programs don't fill.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that doing something to help you figure out who's going to bother to do the extra work to help, you know, fine tune an invitation list makes a lot of sense.
I mean, you know, to be honest, if they can't be bothered to give one paragraph of why they want to apply to Dartmouth Hitchcock, then they're probably not that serious.
Yeah. So Selena Kelly just wrote, we always request for a letter of intent after first screening of applicants. We don't invite everyone to send a letter, just ones that pass the screening. Then after going through those, we do our invitees. It's a bit of process, but it works. I really like that. So this person has already done it. Bill, go ahead.
You go.
So it says, I don't know, so Jenny's Cora said we're planning to do something like this too. Bill Frieger wrote, in preparation for interviews, we've considered filmed statements from our trainees and attendings. We may investigate if we can invite candidates to an interesting case conference. Oh, that's a good point, Bill. We want to stay within the NRMP guidelines and may be advantageous for programs to build content through their websites. Paragraph sounds like a good idea. But he brought up another thing. At our institution, we usually have the attendees go to one of our conferences. So how are people going to show their educational offerings? Are you going to have a residential conference?
Yeah. I think that sort of rolls into the next question we're going to discuss, right? So maybe we'll just hold on that. Francis Wolf has a good point here. If there isn't a camera, how can we be sure it's the applicant? That's a really, I hadn't thought of that, but you know, we have, of course, a photograph of the candidate, and say you had somebody who was not very comfortable in the video interview session, or their language skills were poor, the English language skills, you know, you could see if there was no camera that it could be somebody else on the other end, right? I mean, that's actually, I hadn't thought of that.
One more thing to worry about.
Yes, one more thing.
All right. Other specialties. Oh, wait, what happened to that one? Petra, you moved it.
Oh, not intentionally. I clicked the wrong one.
It says something other specialties have, and I was going to read that to the group because maybe.
He said other specialties have limited the amount of applicants that apply for the program.
Right. And I think that goes through the NRMP. If I'm not an NRMP expert, but at this point, I don't think we can do that, is what I've been told. So we have to do it on our end. I don't think we can limit.
I'm not sure those other specialties, aren't they recommending that students limit the number of applications they send, and they have no power to?
Yeah, I don't think that NRMP, and my understanding isn't that you can only apply to 20 programs or something like that.
I wish that we could limit it.
I do too. It'll be a learning experience this year.
You know, I'm recommending to my students they apply to the same number as I would have recommended anyway. And that's what we try and tell them. I mean, you know, all the evidence, you know, there's nice curves which are out from NRMP. No, actually they come from AAMC that show, you know, if your step 1 score is X, then you have a 95% chance of matching if you apply to this many programs, versus if your step 1 score is, you know, 20 points higher and you need to apply to less programs, and there's a plateau, very clear plateau. Yeah. So that's really useful data for the students to kind of chill them out a little bit.
Neil said, anybody contemplating having a secondary application? So Neil, that's exactly what we're talking about right now. Basically having applicants answer specific questions for their program.
Yeah, I guess what he's saying, he's getting at, rather than before they interview, after they interview, having a secondary maybe also to say, hey, we've interviewed you, how about some more information potentially too?
Oh, I always think of, so to your point, I think of a secondary application as before, but Neil, what were you thinking? Do you want to clarify what secondary application means to you?
No,
I was thinking before, yeah. So yes, I think that people are considering that And it may just be simple as, why are you applying to our program? Or it could be a couple of questions. That will be up to people who decide if they want to do that to help with the application process.
You know, and Petra and I were talking about this a while back on what the disadvantage is of, you know, certain programs. You kind of get a feel, not just for the program, but for where you're going to live in the country during December through February, or, you know, like November or October through January. And you could end up.
That's great.
What's that?
I think that's great.
I know, they're not going to have to, we're going to tell them that it's sunny in Seattle all the time.
Right. I mean, visiting Boston in you know, February, it's not for the faint of heart necessarily. And you don't want somebody who hadn't visited Boston before to end up matching and then being miserable for 4 years. But it sort of gives them an idea of what that place might be like, that area might be like at that time of the year, and they won't have that opportunity to necessarily do that anymore, you know?
Yeah, I think a lot of us, I was telling people that when I interviewed at college, I couldn't afford to go back east, so I did the local interviews. So I showed up to an East Coast school, never seeing it before, and I did fine. So yeah. I think they're going to be okay, but it is a loss. I do agree with you, but I think I will say that the one thing that's going to be interesting this year is Aunt Minnie, is people's experiences and the quote unquote reputations of schools. It will also be interesting if people feel more safe choosing their homeschool based on the fact they really couldn't get an idea. And I wouldn't be surprised if schools maybe go with more of their own students, you know, because it's safer. I don't know. I think it's just going to be really interesting. So savvy candidates will quickly figure out how to game the system and answer why I want to come to your program with some creative writing. But perhaps I'm just being cynical. I think,
you know, nothing else. I actually have to look up about the program because,
yeah,
you know, if I'm looking for one to see why they come to Dartmouth Hitchcock, you know, and they put the quality of the shopping, you know, I'm going to know that they've not done any research whatsoever. So yeah, you're right. But at least they're going to have to put a little effort into it, and which can be a hurdle. I mean, someone says here, we shouldn't make them long. I mean, I think that's, you know, 10-page secondary applications is a bit different than you have to write a paragraph, which you can, you know, do between reading CTs.
Karen asked, does anybody know if there's a secondary application set up through ERAS, or does it have to be done via email, which would be an obvious downside due to email overload or the chance of it getting overlooked? I don't
know the answer to that.
If anybody in the group of attendees knows, please let us know. But that will be something to investigate.
Just to let you know, I've lost my mouse. I mean, I haven't lost my mouse. I've lost my cursor. It's vanished somewhere. So I'll try and get it back if I can, but it just limits me a little bit as to what I can do at the moment. Should we move on to our second topic?
Yes,
here?
Definitely.
I think Hart was making a good segue to that.
Okay. No, I'm sorry. I was just reading the Q&A. I'm ready. Did you want to give me my second slide?
So yeah, it should be there. Is it not there?
Nope. I'm seeing the AMC.
Really? Oh. If I can work out how to stop sharing without a cursor to actually.
That's all right. I remember the question. The question is, it's similar to our first week. It's just how are we going to how will you set your interview day so that the candidate can basically assess your program? So things that we've done in the past that we've brought up are the night before dinner. I think that's very typical. Usually people have a meet the chair or meet a certain number of people in the department.
Angelisa, the question was actually, how can the applicant learn about your program?
Yes.
Which was our question.
Yes. A little bit different. You're right. So there's more like website. I'm sorry. You're right. Website. And so what materials are you going to put out there that the applicant can assess you?
So this is something just to, while people are starting to dial in answers, that we've been thinking at a lot. And, you know, obviously the key to this is going to be beefing up your website significantly. And I think there are many ways that we can do that. We can make little short videos, not 1-hour monologues, that show the department, that are little short interviews with prior residents or current residents and current faculty. Hi, I'm Petra. I'm the Vice Chair of Education. If you come to Dartmouth Hitchcock, I would love to get you involved with educational projects, make a real emphasis on blah, 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 blah. Ones that show the area. I mean, for us, to be honest, interviewing in November in New Hampshire is not a great advantage because it's kind of ugly and cold. We can have some nice little videos of the summer and the residents hiking or skiing in winter, sort of things they do, the sort of places that the residents like to hang out. They're putting together these videos. We've got like somebody who has a drone that's doing stuff.
That's a good point.
Yeah, most institutions are like doing institutional ones, but they're going to be kind of formal. I think these, what you really want to convey, and is I think the real challenge, especially for smaller programs or less well-known programs, is the culture, the culture of your program. Because that's something that, we get a lot of people ranking us because of our culture, not because, we're University of Washington or, we're Duke or MGH or somewhere, with a big brand name, face. So, how can you do that? And you need to start doing it now. I mean, this can't wait. It's going to take months to get this done and up, and the students are going to start, putting their, they can submit them September 15th, right? So, they will, they're going to spend late August, early September researching programs. I think you can provide web links to noon conference so that they can go and watch some of the teaching going on, especially, get everyone to behave sort of for a week or so around the interview time so that they can come and link into some of the conferences and see what's being done. You can utilize social media, have your, we don't have a institutional, looks like my cursor's still not back, but I can try. We don't have an institutional or departmental social media presence, but that would be a good way to engage people, have them be able to converse with residents, up ahead and after the interview. We're doing a sell job, but we have to make those websites navigable. They've got to be easy. They need to be not sort of overloaded with 3 billion hyperlinks.
And I would say also leveraging, clearly you need sort of departmental info for your radiology departments, but I would definitely leverage any of the assets that the School of Medicine has that you're affiliated with, any of the assets that the hospital has that you're affiliated with. I think the more information, the better. So if your hospital does have a promotional video, send that along, or at least a link to that along. If your School of Medicine has a promotional video that they've done, they probably spent a lot of money on, send that along to the applicants too once they've applied, or at least, the ones that you're going to interview. So a lot of that burden doesn't have to fall on you. Certainly the departmental assets do, the video or the website or whatever you're going to use. But I think it's important to reach out to the School of Medicine and the hospital and say, hey, do you guys have some information that is done well that we can also send to the people that we're interviewing?
There's a ton of good stuff coming through here. I just having a little trouble. Could somebody who's on the call, right, Neil Madden, seeing as I know you, can you see the Q&A as they're coming in, or do I need to push them through before?
I can see them.
I know, but you're a participant.
Oh, I see.
Neil's
got it.
So,
Yeah.
Neil, can you see them? Like, there's the last Q&A is from Sandra Palmer. Oh no, it's not telling me. Oh yes, he's seeing them. Okay, good. But Maggie can't see him. Okay, that's. All right, okay. I'm trying to do what I can without a mouse.
Okay, so I'm skipping. So Jenny Cora asked, has anyone considered uncoupling aspects of the interview day? For example, have a virtual resident happy hour scheduled some days before the interview season, and applicants can attend if they want. So that's a really interesting. And Jenny, that spurred me to think of something. Had anybody thought of maybe having a cocktail hour before applications are even due? Learn about a program, decide if you want to decide if you want to apply.
Yeah,
It's a great
that's
idea.
an idea. What we also
Right?
talked about
Like we always have just the website, but maybe that's how, for programs that sometimes feel that they're not as well known, but that might be a neat thing. Come meet our faculty, come meet our program. I don't know. I'm throwing that out. Jenny.
One thing we also talked about at BU was setting out a schedule in the beginning of the interview season of 4 or 5 nights in which a themed social hour was going to be held. So if you were interested in neuro and neural research, there would be, you know, people interested, whether it was the residents, the PhDs, or the neuro faculty. You could join in, and if you were interested in breast imaging, you could join that particular cocktail hour that was theme-based, and we would literally send out the cocktail hour schedule at the beginning of the interview season, and you could join any of those that you wanted to join based on your interest that you had.
Right.
I mean, and I think this is another, following your train, Hart, before, saying, you know, let's reinvent it, because we've always had like the pre-interview dinner. Well, why does it have to be pre-interview?
Right.
Why can't it be post-interview? Why can't it be, like you say, 2 weeks pre-interview?
I think this is sort of analogous to the Arizona system, where they did all their interviews online, but then they had in-person visits to do a tour that was at the applicants. This was before COVID, but it was at the applicants, you know, choice, so that they could split the 2 aspects of the kind of the interview process, the social versus the, you know, formal interviews. But I think the idea of splitting the 2 virtual halves so they weren't time dependent on each other, it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I also like the idea of themes, Harp.
Yeah.
Whether you decide to do it the day of, does your chat room have themes during the day of your interview, or does it have, are they spread out, to your point, over the week, and people can drop in? It would be harder, I would say, Harp, on me if I was trying to assess candidates during those hours, if they're coming in and out, for me to remember part of the day when they come, thank goodness, but maybe you're better at this than me, remembering names and things like being able to host people in a cohesive way. If someone pops in, I'll be like, oh, is that Shelley? No, that's Sherry. So
yeah, I was just thinking, we were just thinking that it was an opportunity for more information about your area of interest in our department and hospital. You know, like what I did for my neuro fellows, for example, my neuro fellow interviews, I invited neurology and neurosurgery and ENT clinicians to have lunch with my neuro fellow candidates.
Sure. So
this is another opportunity to say, hey, if you're interested in neuro in particular, I can even invite some clinicians to that cocktail hour, and you can ask them what they're up to or what types of research they're doing. So it gives you some flexibility in inviting people outside of the radiology department to those events also.
So Sandra Palma did say we're looking to do a virtual open house for our program over the summer.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea. And you could do it with breakout rooms. So you could have like a group intro, have some residents show some little videos and things, and then have, you know, okay, you know, we've got some breakout rooms. Anyone who's really interested in research or education or even neuroradiology.
Sandra, how are you going to invite? Because we usually don't know who the applicants are until ERAS is open. So how do you, I don't know.
Aunt Minnie, maybe. Social media.
Yeah, social media. Interesting. Karen Johnson, if every program has multiple events on different days that the applicants are invited to, it could get very overwhelming to an applicant juggling all those different events. I agree. But then maybe it will give you a hint of whether, if they're prioritizing yours. But I agree, Karen, it could be challenging.
One thing that I'm really saying, I said to the students, is this year beyond any others, they really need to very carefully document for each program, the interview, the interactions, the interview, their feeling of it, you know, by whatever criteria they consider important. Because, you know, we remember places much better than we do, you know, pretty much anything else. And so, you know, our feeling of what it was like to go to University of Washington is going to kind of tie all those feelings together, where our remembrance of 1 out of 40, not would be 40, but the innumerable Zoom calls is going to be much worse when they come to rank. So that's, I'm really telling them, start your spreadsheet now, just after every interview session, check down, where you would mark them on the things that are really important to you, like friendliness of the faculty, ability of, availability of research, cost of living, whatever it happens to be.
It will be more of a blur.
Neil's got a good point here, moving back to sort of doing videos on your website is, we talked about biases, how a program is going to be compared based on the quality of the videos. Money talks with videos. And, I think that's true. And that's something we discussed as well, because like the less well-funded programs and the smaller programs are ones who really need to look good are going to be the ones that maybe challenge. But, if I think with the equipment that's around these days, you can do something thoughtful and effective at not a massive cost. It may just be, more time.
And that's what I also mean, like leveraging your institution and medical school, who probably have bigger budgets than a lot of the small radiology departments may. Leveraging those assets, I think, is important too.
Maggie Harp wants to know, how are you going to send out your themed group of get-togethers ahead of time? Are you going to do it?
Well, I think what we'll
interview
do is,
broker?
Yeah, we'll send, we'll have maybe one a month based on a different theme for everybody that interviewed. And we can just email those people that we invited for interviews that schedule in the beginning, we're probably going to have our list of people that we're inviting for interviews at the very beginning of the season. And we'll have our schedule of themed events, and we'll email everybody that we're interviewing that list of themed events for the year, for the season, I should say.
I'm kind of worried. I know this sounds strange, but are people going to be sending people meal? Like, do you as a program director feel there's going to be some upmanship that everyone's, people maybe with more money, like they will actually send a dinner, or they will send a cocktail, or well, I guess you wouldn't sell alcohol, but you know what I'm saying is,
or a Dartmouth Hitchcock baseball hat or something.
Yeah, I don't know if for graduation, a lot of people sent dinners, including our program, and it was lovely. I don't know. I just think this is I do think there is some but there is going to be people be trying to impress.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And it's funny that you say that, Angelisa, because I had a friend who threw his wife her 40th birthday party. He invited a guitarist to play during the Zoom call. Right. Like he had a musician entertaining the group for her birthday, so it is not out of the realm of possibility that the husband will hire like a juggler or a comedian, or who, I don't know what, but there's a chance that there may be some entertainment hired during social events,
Right. But people do that already. I mean, I have students who come back from, and the pre-interview dinner was like some ridiculously expensive club that was taken over for the evening, and in Manhattan.
I know. One year we did pizza, and we were told that, well, at this place they took us out for steak, and we're like,
yeah, so
go there.
People always do that. I mean, are we thinking, should we send them a little goodie bag of the sort of stuff that we normally give them? I mean, none of it's ridiculous. Although I personally said they should send them a copy of my book, because then I would get like 2 cents. People won't do that, but it's good advertising for Dartmouth Hitchcock.
True.
But we may do that.
I'm not going to do that.
But
good. I'm hoping. I hope people. I guess that's what I'm advocating for, is for people to be a little bit sensible.
We can only hope. It's going to happen, and the students who, to be honest, are going to be influenced by that sort of thing, and not necessarily the students I'd want coming to my program. So, if they can be bought off that easily.
True.
So I think we can only do what we can. And Neil's got a comment here. We're talking in our GME office about crowdsourcing from our residents to create videos, working out the rules of the road in terms of what's allowed for video in the hospital. Other institutions created such rules.
Do they have rules about doing videos in their hospitals? I hadn't even thought of that.
No, I mean, we've got somebody in our department who has gathered a little committee together of the residents, and they're doing it between them. We haven't said to him, but you know, I think it's obvious that you can't have patients in it. So maybe I should say that to him, though. Now you say, thank you, Neil.
Yeah, I wonder if any of that has to have the blessing of the GME office, or at least somebody in the hospital, before you send out video that's being done in the hospital, you know.
Probably it's a good thought.
All right, I just want to remind people it's 2:56. Do any closing statements? Harp, are there things from the article that we didn't cover that you wanted to share?
You know, the one thing I found interesting in my research for this was the idea of assessment and how people put different weights on situational interviews and gauging emotional intelligence and correlating that with success in residency or beyond. Overwhelmingly, none of that played out. So anybody who tries to be strategic with situational interviews and we're doing this to gauge blah, 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 and people feel they can't do that in person, don't worry about that because almost none of it played out. First of all, the definition of success is variable, clearly, but even if you look at scores and you know, whatever metrics we use for success subsequently, none of that stuff played out.
So you're talking about the ones that had standardized behavioral questions.
Exactly, and yeah, all that stuff, even gauging emotional intelligence in any capacity, none of that played out to success as a resident
meaning positive predictive value.
Correct. Right. So if there's any, idea that I won't be able to do this stuff or I would be able to do it better in person, don't worry about it because it didn't play out anyway.
And, you know, I think that really comes back to the whole thing that we know that interviews are, you know, we're worrying a lot about these interviews, but, you know, how many times as program director did you say, you know, you've got a challenging resident or it's run into some real professionalism issue and you say, well, I didn't get any hint of that in the interviews. We loved him or we loved her in the interviews. They were completely selfish bastards.
You ended up with somebody on your list that you weren't totally happy about and they end up being your chief resident and a star attending. I mean, like it goes both ways in that way, you know?
Yeah. And then in closing, the one thing I do want to raise to the group to think about, because I think about this, is I went through a time in which we did have group interviews for medical school. That was popular back when I was interviewing. And I will say that there was, it was odd at times because you would sometimes have extroverts or you would have, sometimes you'd have people that would be trying to impress. And I felt like at times I couldn't get a word in edgewise, which for those of you that know me, that would be unusual. But when you have anxiety at these things, it can heighten behaviors. So I think of these things, how will you moderate a guest room chat, or what are they called? The chat rooms, sorry. So that you can assess that a person's behavior. Again, the introverts might be more quiet, the extroverts might be, you know, so I think that as hosts on a virtual world, if you have someone in each chat room, you might, as a program director, also talk about how do you get those that are not speaking to participate and those that are speaking too much to settle down.
I think that's important. And I think that's another reason why, if you're doing things in small breakout rooms, whether it's a formal discussion or it's a social hour, is to keep those groups very small, because that's, you know, you got 3 students there, that's one thing. You've got 8 students there, that's very challenging.
Yeah. I interviewed at places where they'd have panelists of 5, and I was the 5th, like, of 5 medical students interviewing, or for medical school, I'm sorry, and it was uncomfortable. So I'm just warning people to think about how would that run in these chat rooms, and the biases that may come across if you have interviewers together. Lots of fun things to think about.
Oh, yeah.
It's 3 o'clock. Thank you for coming. I want to share with you that next, in 2 weeks, our last session will be nuts and bolts. I will be asking a few STAR program coordinators to also be present so that they can start articulating how they think of just the nuts and bolts to have an honest discussion of scheduling. How far out should we time our interviews? What should we do if we have a failure on with computers? Just those kinds of things. Should we have an IT person with you all day? Just really nuts and bolts facts. But I think those that have experience with the interviewing and what can go wrong, I would really appreciate you coming back and sharing your thoughts or what you're worried about so that we can brainstorm together. All right. Take care of everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.